What if I told you there's a pest control secret so effective, so devastatingly simple, that a multi-billion-dollar industry has spent decades making sure you never hear about it? Not because it doesn't work, but because it works too well, and it costs almost nothing. Stay with me. Because what I'm about to share doesn't come from a lab funded by a chemical company. It doesn't come from a slick marketing campaign or an influencer who got paid to hold up a bottle. It comes from 300 years of quiet, uninterrupted success on the same plots of land, in the same communities, passed down through the same families, and it has been sitting right under our noses the entire time. This is the stuff they buried, and today we're digging it back up. Here's what almost nobody talks about. In Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, there are tens of thousands of people who have been growing food on the exact same soil for over 3 centuries. No synthetic pesticides, no rotating chemical subscriptions, no emergency trips to the garden center. And yet, their crops don't just survive. They flourish, season after season, decade after decade, on land that, by every conventional logic, should be depleted, overrun, and collapsing under the weight of pest pressure. But it isn't. And the reason why completely rewrites everything most of us were ever taught about how plants actually protect themselves. I want you to picture something. Imagine 2 plots of farmland, side by side, divided by nothing more than a property line. Same seeds planted on the same day, same variety, same fertilizer, same weather, hitting both fields equally. Now imagine that at harvest, one of those plots looks like a war zone. 80% of the leaves destroyed, covered in mildew, the crop essentially lost, and the field right next to it, literally 2 feet away, is untouched. 0 infection, not a trace of damage. A clean, sharp line running straight down the middle like nature drew a boundary and said, this side understood something. That side didn't. That's not a hypothetical. That actually happened. And the young man who witnessed it, an 18-year-old named John Kemp with an 8th grade education and a burning need to understand what he had just seen, would go on to spend the next 2 years in a public library reading university biology textbooks, ordering research volumes from Germany and France through interlibrary loan, teaching himself plant physiology and soil chemistry from scratch, because what he saw in that field didn't make sense within the framework he had been handed. And when something doesn't make sense, you don't ignore it. You go find the deeper truth. What Kemp discovered, and what researchers at some of the most respected agricultural universities in the country are now confirming, is that plants have an immune system, not a loose metaphor for one, a literal, multi-layered biological immune system that responds directly to mineral nutrition in the soil. When a plant has the right balance of iron, manganese, copper, zinc, and nitrogen in the correct molecular form, it achieves something researchers call complete photosynthesis. And when that happens, it converts all of its available soluble nitrates into complete proteins at the cellular level. Now here's the part that should make your jaw drop. Larvae stage insects, caterpillars, hornworms, aphids, whiteflies, thrips, cannot digest complete proteins. Their digestive systems are too primitive. They evolved to feed specifically on soluble nitrates. So when a plant is mineral healthy enough to convert all of its available nitrogen into protein, the pest lands on the leaf, tries to feed, gets nothing it can biologically process, and leaves. The plant hasn't killed anything, it hasn't sprayed anything, it hasn't repelled anything. It has simply removed the food source at a cellular level. The aphid is sitting on a lush, abundant plant and starving to death. And this transformation, this shift in the plant's internal chemistry, can begin within 24 to 48 hours of the right minerals becoming available in the root zone. The Amish had been observing this outcome for 300 years without the scientific vocabulary to explain the mechanism. John Kemp gave them the mechanism. The science finally caught up to the tradition. This is the part that the pesticide industry does not want printed on the back of any bottle. Because the moment you understand that plant health, not chemical intervention, is the actual solution, you stop being a repeat customer. And a customer who stops buying is the single greatest threat to a business model built on your continued dependence. Think about what that model looks like from the inside. You buy a bottle. The pests come back. You buy another bottle. The pests come back. You switch brands. You try the organic version that costs $4 more. The pests come back. Every season, the same cycle. And the whole time, the real solution has been sitting in the soil beneath your feet, waiting for you to stop poisoning it long enough to let it work. And let's talk about how to actually build this. Because this isn't abstract. This is practical, actionable, and almost entirely free. The foundation of everything the Amish have done for generations is the soil itself. Every spring, before a single seedling goes in the ground, spread 2 to 3 inches of well-aged compost across your beds and work it into the top 4 to 6 inches. If you can source compost that includes aged horse or cow manure, even better. The combination of decomposed plant material and aged animal waste creates a soil microbiome, a living, breathing underground ecosystem, rich and diverse enough to unlock the mineral absorption pathways that allow plants to build genuine resistance at the cellular level. One season won't transform your soil. The Amish understand this. They've been building the same plots this way for generations. 2 to 3 seasons of consistent annual additions. And your soil becomes something fundamentally different. Alive in a way that commercially treated ground almost never is. The difference shows up in the plants. Thicker stems, deeper color. And when the occasional pest shows up, it rarely stays because there's nothing there for it to eat. Now, beyond the soil, the Amish approach to pest control involves something that looks deceptively simple, but is actually a form of ecological engineering that most of us were never taught to think about. Most American gardens are planted in clean, uniform rows. Tomatoes in one section, beans in another, squash along the back edge. It looks organized. It photographs nicely. But to a pest navigating by scent, and most garden pests find their targets entirely by smell, a long, uniform row of one plant is a highway. No obstacles, no confusion. Just an open path straight to dinner. The Amish deliberately mix everything up. They interplant aromatic herbs and flowers directly among their vegetables, because the science of pest navigation confirms what 3 centuries of observation already showed. Aphids, cabbage moths, cucumber beetles, hornworms, they all locate their targets by following chemical signals the host plants release into the air. When you surround those host plants with strong aromatic companions, you create what entomologists call olfactory confusion. The pest literally cannot locate your tomatoes because the basil, the marigolds, and the dill are drowning out every scent signal it depends on. Imagine trying to track one specific voice in a stadium full of 60,000 screaming fans. The signal doesn't just fade, it disappears entirely. Here's what this looks like in practice. For every 3 to 4 tomato plants, tuck one basil plant about 8 to 10 inches from the base. The Amish have planted these 2 together for generations. Basil repels aphids, whiteflies, and hornworms. Science has confirmed the chemistry. Tradition knew it first. Between rows of cabbage, broccoli, or kale, plant dill or cilantro every 12 to 14 inches. These repel cabbage moths and imported cabbage worms. But here's the layer underneath that strategy. When the dill and cilantro flower, they attract parasitic wasps and hoverflies, insects that are aggressive predators of the exact same caterpillars and aphids you're trying to exclude. You're simultaneously repelling one pest population and recruiting their natural enemies. 2 systems running at the same time from the same plants. Along the borders of your beds, plant French marigolds, not the large African varieties, the smaller French ones, about 10 to 12 inches apart. Their roots release a compound called alpha-terthional into the surrounding soil that suppresses root knot nematodes. Their scent above ground deters whiteflies and squash bugs. Multiple agricultural universities have confirmed the nematode suppressing effect in controlled trials. The Amish refined this practice over generations because they watched it work. The science confirmed the chemistry later. Now let's talk about something that challenges everything a conventional gardening background teaches you. A healthy garden is not a garden with no insects. A healthy garden is one with the right balance of insects. That difference is enormous, and it defines whether you are working with nature or endlessly fighting against it. A single ladybug eats up to 50 aphids per day. One lacewing larva consumes 200 aphids in its short lifetime. Parasitic wasps lay their eggs inside hornworms and cabbage worms, destroying them from the inside out before the damage is even visible to you. Ground beetles patrol soil surfaces every night, hunting slugs, cutworms, and grubs while you're asleep. These creatures are your pest control team. They work around the clock, they don't ask for a paycheck, they don't need a weekend off. All they ask for is habitat and a food source. Every time you spray, even with something labeled organic, you remove the food source that keeps beneficial insects in your garden. You break the cycle that was already managing the problem for you. You fire your best workers and then wonder why the job isn't getting done. The Amish build their gardens specifically to keep beneficial insects employed. The method is called an insectary strip, and it takes almost no space. Along one border of your garden, plant a row roughly 2 feet wide. Sweet alyssum at the front. It stays low and blooms all season. Behind it, alternate yarrow and dill about 10 inches apart. Add fennel at the back if you have the room. The goal is continuous bloom from spring through fall, so there is always nectar available. Give beneficial insects a reason to stay, and they will patrol every single row. Take that reason away, and they find somewhere else to live. The Amish also leave small sections of their property intentionally unmowed. A clover patch near the garden, an uncut strip along the fence line, a flat pile of stones where ground beetles can shelter through the heat of the afternoon. These are not signs of neglect. They are deliberate infrastructure for the organisms doing work you can't do yourself. A perfectly manicured garden with bare soil between every row has effectively posted a sign that says, "No vacancy." And every creature that would have worked in your favor reads that sign and moves on. Here at Secret Vault, we dig into the knowledge that quietly survives outside the industrial conversation. And what we found is that the most powerful techniques almost always come from the communities that never stopped practicing them. Which brings us to the morning walk. This sounds almost too simple to mention. But every Amish gardener I learned about in Lancaster County mentioned it the same way. Not as a chore, but as the single most important thing they do. Every morning before the heat sets in, you walk every row slowly. You bring a small bucket with an inch or two of water and a drop of plain dish soap. You turn over leaves. You check the undersides of squash foliage. You run your eyes along every stem. When you find a pest, you drop it in the bucket. Here's why this matters far more than it sounds. Most serious pest damage doesn't come from a single insect. It comes from a small population that was allowed to double and double again without interruption. A single tomato hornworm strips an entire branch in 48 hours. A pair of squash bugs can lay hundreds of eggs in a single week. By the time the damage is alarming enough to send you reaching for a product, the population has already tripled, and the window for easy intervention has passed. The morning walk catches them at 2, not at 20. 2 seasons of this habit, and you begin to know your garden in a completely different way. You know what normal looks like. You recognize immediately what isn't. You catch problems while they're still problems instead of disasters. That is 90% of pest management right there. For the moments when pest pressure is heavier than soil health and companion planting alone can manage, the Amish kitchen provides the next layer, 4 to 5 garlic cloves and 2 hot peppers. Cayenne works perfectly, but any hot variety will do. Chop them roughly and steep them in 1 quart of warm water for at least 12 hours. The next morning, strain it through cheesecloth into a spray bottle and add 1 teaspoon of plain liquid dish soap. The soap helps the mixture adhere to leaf surfaces and disrupts the protective waxy coating on soft-bodied insects like aphids. Spray the undersides of leaves in early morning or late evening, never in direct midday sun. 1 application holds for 5 to 7 days under normal conditions. Reapply after heavy rain. This spray doesn't kill on contact the way a synthetic product does. It makes the plant unpleasant, biologically hostile, to feed on. Combined with healthy soil, companion planting, a functioning beneficial insect population, and daily monitoring, that deterrent effect is more than sufficient for the vast majority of challenges a home garden encounters. It's part of a system. The Amish have always understood it that way. There's also a trap crop strategy that requires almost no daily effort at all. Nasturtiums attract aphids far more aggressively than almost any vegetable crop. Plant them in a ring around the outer edge of your garden, 6 to 8 inches apart. The aphids concentrate on the nasturtiums and largely ignore what's growing inside. Once those plants are dense with aphids, ladybugs find the feast and stay in your garden for the rest of the season. You arrange living things. The system ran itself. For squash vine borers and cucumber beetles, a few blue Hubbard squash plants placed at the far corners of your garden act as powerful decoys. These pests find the Hubbard first, concentrate there, and your main crop is largely protected. You sacrifice those plants willingly, 1 planting, and the pest redirects itself to the wrong address without any intervention from you. Now, here's the piece that ties everything together, and the one technique I genuinely had never encountered in any gardening book, any extension publication, or anywhere else until I started digging into agricultural research running parallel to traditional Amish dairy farming practice. For generations, Amish families who operated dairy farms used diluted milk as a foliar spray on their vegetable gardens and field crops, not as a fertilizer, as a pest and disease deterrent. When milk was sour, when a batch hadn't sold, when there was surplus from the dairy, it went on the garden. It was practical and free, and the families that used it consistently noticed that their plants handled disease pressure differently than gardens that didn't receive it. In 1999, researchers at São Paulo State University in Brazil ran controlled trials comparing a 10% milk solution, 1 part whole milk, 9 parts water, against standard chemical fungicides on zucchini infected with powdery mildew. The results were published in the journal Crop Protection. The milk solution performed comparably to the chemicals in suppressing the infection, not somewhat less effective, comparably effective. That research was replicated. The findings held across additional crops and conditions. Here's the mechanism, and this is where it connects directly back to everything about mineral plant immunity and what John Kemp discovered in that Ohio field. Whole milk contains lactoferrin, immunoglobulins, and whey proteins. When applied as a foliar spray and allowed to dry on the leaf surface, these proteins create a thin protective film that interferes with the germination of fungal spores and disrupts the feeding mechanism of soft-bodied insects, including aphids and spider mites. The potassium present in milk also strengthens cell walls, reinforcing the same systemic resistance pathway that Kemp's mineral research identified. But here's the part the Amish understood long before any of it appeared in a journal. When you spray milk on plants and they sit in sunlight, the proteins in the milk oxidize. That oxidized protein layer is directly hostile to powdery mildew. The sun does the biological work. You simply provide the delivery vehicle. Picture this: a leaf surface coated in a thin, dried film of protein, sitting in morning sunlight, chemically hostile to every fungal spore trying to take hold. For free. In 3 minutes. With something you already have in your refrigerator. The application is almost absurdly simple. Mix 1 part whole milk, or raw milk if you have access. Standard grocery store whole milk works fine, with 9 parts water. That's roughly 3 tablespoons of milk per quart of water. Pour it into a spray bottle. Apply it to the tops and undersides of leaves in the morning on a day when sun is expected. 2 to 3 times per week during periods of high humidity, or the moment you see the first faint white coating appearing on your squash or cucumber leaves. If you have dairy animals, use any milk that has gone slightly sour. The Amish never wasted it. 1 quart covers a substantial garden area and costs approximately 30 cents in milk per treatment cycle. No brand name, no store trip, no chemical residue, no harm to your beneficial insects, no waiting period before harvest. This is what the system looks like when all the pieces connect. You build healthy soil. Your plants convert nitrogen into complete protein. The insects land and have nothing left to eat. You plant companions. The pests cannot locate their target through the aromatic noise. You build insectary habitat. The beneficial insects stay and patrol every hour you're not watching. You walk the rows each morning. Nothing builds to the scale of a real problem. You use trap crops. The pests go to the wrong address. When you need a foliar boost, garlic and pepper spray deters without destroying the ecology underneath. And when humidity climbs and fungal pressure rises, diluted milk applied in morning sunlight creates a protective layer that the garden center cannot replicate, patent, or charge you for. Not one of these techniques requires a purchase. Every one of them has been running on Amish farms for generations, and the science is confirming them one study at a time. Because careful observation, practiced over centuries, eventually produces the same answers that a controlled trial produces. It just takes longer to write up in a journal. At Secret Vault, this is exactly the kind of buried knowledge we exist to bring back to the surface. The industrial food system needs this to feel complicated. It needs the solution to require their expertise and their products and your continued purchasing. But a plant defended from the inside by mineral health, surrounded by companions that confuse its enemies, supported by a habitat that keeps its natural allies employed, and watched every morning by someone paying attention, is not a plant that needs a bottle. Try the milk spray this week. The next time humidity rises and your squash leaves start to show that faint white powder, mix it in 3 minutes, apply it in morning sun, and come back the next day. Look at what sunlight and protein do together to a leaf surface that fungi are trying to colonize. Then start the morning walk. Then add 1 companion planting this season. Don't try to do everything at once. Just break the cycle. 1 piece at a time, because the Amish didn't build 300 years of success overnight. They built it 1 observation, 1 season, 1 quiet morning at a time. And you can do the same thing, starting right now, starting with what you already have,